It's time for the Brew and Shavers Sports Podcast. Coming at you every week to talk all the things that make us love sports. The games, the rivalries, and of course, the personalities.
The March. I almost said the March Madness. I'm going to go to the Walmart.
I like indefinite articles, okay?
Can we just start over?
Absolutely.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back. It's another episode of the Brew and Shaver Sports Podcast. It's so good to have you with us. I'm joined by my always knowledgeable and spot on and analytical mind of Darren Shavers. How are you doing, Darren?
Well, first of all, you know how it works. You just set me up. The first three things I say are going to be like in left field wrongs. Which, I mean, let's be honest, that could have happened anyway, even if you hadn't have said that. But anyway, but doing good. How about you tonight?
I thought we had a fact checker. I thought we have a very limited budget, but we found a college student and we promised free Taco Bell if he would do fact checking for us. But I guess that didn't pan out.
Free Taco Bell, free pizza, right? It'll do. It's amazing what that'll do for a college student.
Now, if we can find someone to do their laundry, we might hire somebody.
We might have a lifelong employee at that point.
That's right. So thank you for being here. Today is a very solemn day. It's a day of remembrance here in our country because we remember September 11th, 2001, the attacks in New York City, the attack at the Pentagon, and a possible attack that was going to be directed toward the U.S. Capitol or the White House that was stopped by courageous passengers. We stop and remember today those attacks and what a tremendously riveting day that was for all of us here in the United States.
Absolutely.
2,983 people lost their lives. Again, the World Trade Center planes flew into both towers of the World Trade Center. Another plane crashed into the Pentagon, and another plane was down in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, because of the passengers on board stopping whatever the intent of the hijackers was. So we want to stop and we want to remember, because that's the right thing to do, to go back and to not forget what happened on that day. And
Absolutely.
In the aftermath of that, Darren, sports played a very important role in helping us to process, to recover, to give us something to find joy in again. And one of the most iconic moments was when President George Bush threw out the first pitch at the Yankees game. You remember that, Darren?
Oh, absolutely. Like it was yesterday. Truthfully, that was truly an incredible moment.
And you see a lot of first pitches and they don't always end well, but he threw a perfect strike. It was a great
Exactly.
pitch. And in that moment, we all cheered. It didn't matter what political party you affiliated with. In that moment, we were all Americans. We all came together. We all cheered. And sports played a big role, I think, in helping us in the days, in the weeks, and the months ahead.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It did. There's no doubt about that. And, even, of course, that moment was a very iconic moment. And actually, we'll talk a little bit more about that in our This Week in Sports History. But not only that moment, but it was at least a couple of weeks afterwards that there were no events whatsoever. There were no large gatherings. There were no. So I remember being at at a football game that first Saturday. And even those moments were so unifying and so cathartic and healing and all, a little bit tense and scary, kind of all at the same time. But I remember, obviously, I was at a Vanderbilt game, but like I said, it was the first one afterwards. So it was a couple of weeks afterwards, or whatever that time frame is. And everyone sang the anthem together. Everyone sang. It was the entire stadium singing "America the Beautiful" and things like that. Those were really, really unifying, incredible moments that sports opened the pathway for in such a difficult time in our nation's history.
And today, again, we pay homage. We remember the lives that were lost in that moment,
Absolutely.
but we also remember the great acts of courage and bravery. The first responders who ran into buildings that were collapsing, uh,
Absolutely.
who willingly, basically laid down their lives to help and save others. And we remember their courage, their bravery, from the New York Police Department to the New York Fire Department, and for all of those who came from all over the country to help
Mhm.
afterwards. It was a moment that was devastating, but at the same time, in the aftermath, as we came together, it proved to be very inspiring as well.
Absolutely.
Well, I hate to move on from that
Yeah.
into the next headline we have, because there's no happy good feelings about this one, and
Mm-mm.
and that is the situation at Michigan State with head coach Mel Tucker. We don't
Right.
normally cover the Big Ten on this podcast, but this has been such a major news story that we'll mention, and we'll tell you a little bit about what's going on there in case you have not heard. Mel Tucker, the head coach at Michigan State, has been suspended without pay. There is ongoing investigation. There was a complaint made against him in December of 2022. An outside investigation was launched that concluded in July of this year. And now all these facts and allegations, if you will, have come to the surface, and that's all being processed and looked at. And I think there's a hearing coming up. But it appears that Mel Tucker's time at Michigan State is at an end.
Yes. And like you said, all the details and everything out there, but that's kind of the big thing. It appears as the conclusion of everything has happened, the ultimate conclusion is going to be that he will no longer be at Michigan State.
In the meantime, they've elevated from within, but also Mark D'Antonio, a well-respected coach who had a successful run at Michigan State, is
Mhm.
coming back to help the program through this turbulent time. And it's so refreshing that schools have coaches like this. I think about the
Yeah,
times where OU has turned to Bob Stoops in
absolutely.
such moment. And when you have a coach like that who leaves and is highly respected because of his integrity, and you can bring him back in moments like this. I know Mark D'Antonio is going to be somewhat of a balm, if you will, for that program during this time.
Absolutely. And I think it's a good move by the administration to bring somebody just like you said, just like Oklahoma's done with Bob Stoops, bring back somebody that has that credibility within and from outside of the program as well.
We will be watching those events unfold and see where Michigan State goes from here.
Mhm.
Some other news that was shocking, but yet we have good news to report about it, is the situation with Liam Cohen, the offensive coordinator at Kentucky. A medical emergency this past Saturday, is hospitalized. But Darren, according to what you have heard, he is doing much better.
Yeah, there was even some conversation that he could be released as early as Monday from the hospital. At the time that we're recording, we don't have that information. He has not, to our knowledge, been released. But even if he's not, even if it ends up being a day or a couple of days, whatever, that's still incredibly good news. Yeah, especially within our conference, what our last year has been like when you hear that a coach has had a medical emergency, with Mike Leach, that immediately it brings up those scary feelings, and you dread the worst because of how that situation turned out. But thankfully, with this one, it seems that he is improved in good condition, and at some point will be going home hopefully soon.
That is wonderful news. We
Yep,
wish him all the best in his recovery. Our prayers are with him and his family.
absolutely.
So, on that high note, Darren, let's talk about some week 2 takeaways. We just concluded the second week of this college football season, and there's a lot to talk about. So, as you look back over the games this past weekend, Darren, what's your number one takeaway?
I think my number one takeaway has to be our old buddy Jimbo. And when I was putting these numbers together, I almost felt like I was kind of picking on him, and that's not my intent. But reality of the numbers is reality of the numbers. Obviously, this past weekend, for many, many, many A&M faithful, well, all A&M faithful, it did not go as intended. For those of us that were talking about, there may be some things that look different this year because of Bobby Petrino, and we had high expectations. Yeah, this weekend again didn't go the way we expected. And it kind of exposes a little bit of a reality of the Jimbo Fisher era. In the first 62 games, Jimbo is the A&M led Jimbo Fisher led A&M is 40-22. During that same amount of games, the first 62 games of the Kevin Sumlin era, he was 43-19. So at this point in his time at A&M, Kevin Sumlin had 3 more wins. Just in case that wasn't enough to say maybe it's not going the way everybody thought it would, especially Jimbo. He is in his last 8 games against Power 5 teams. He is 1-7 and has lost his last 7 road games straight. So all 7 road games, the last 7 he's played, he has lost. So there is nothing about those numbers that says things are going the way that everybody thought they would in Aggie land. It is not a positive situation at this point. I don't think it's time to just come running in and burn it down yet. But I mean, when you're looking at the way Kevin Sumlin was ultimately run out of town, and Jimbo's sitting in a worse place, that's not a positive.
Those are some sobering facts, Darren. I'm wondering, did a representative from Bobby Petrino give you that information?
It was the people that are now putting up the firejimbo.com billboards. It was one of those guys. Those are already going up somewhere, right? I mean, it has to be.
It's a tough sport to be in when you do not win, when you don't meet expectations.
Right. That's exactly right. How about you? What's your first takeaway, Ben?
My first takeaway goes to the Ole Miss Tulane game, which was a terrific game. I love the fact that they were playing. It was just a great game to watch. Mm-hmm. And my takeaway from that is that Ole Miss has a kicker. Caden Davis, not only did he go 4 for 4 in extra points, he went 3 for 3 on field goal attempts, including a 56-yarder toward the end of the game. Mm-hmm. An incredible kick in an outdoor stadium. So I left that game thinking, wow, Caden Davis, you showed out today. And we don't often talk about kickers except when they miss a kick.
Exactly.
But I wanted to mention the incredible performance from Caden Davis, Ole Miss.
Hey, props to him. Like you said, that's just something we don't do very often. It's usually because the kicker has missed 3 field goals, not because they made 3. So that's awesome. Good for him. Great takeaway.
My second takeaway from the past weekend goes to we're going back to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, where Alabama has some concerns on offense. You could argue they're quarterback concerns. You could argue they're offensive line concerns, or they're a combination of both. Jalen Milroe, statistically 14 for 27, 255 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. But he had happy feet a lot. It reminded me a little bit of what Jaden Daniels from LSU tends to do. He didn't seem to make his reads, go through his progressions before he started taking off and relying on his feet. And when you are as athletic as Milroe is, there's a tendency to rely on your athleticism. And when he gets in the open field, he's hard to catch, no doubt about it. But I think there are some concerns there. I also think there are concerns from the fact that the offensive line at Alabama is not where we would expect it to be at this point in the season. Now, there's a lot of football left to play, but I think Alabama has some big concerns on the offensive side of the ball. What about you?
Well, first of all, I mean, if you think about it, this is our 3rd or 4th year, at least our 3rd year, that we're talking about offensive line struggles at Alabama. I mean, so that's tough and not what you expect. It's not what you expect from Alabama. That's a great take. I'm going to just ask the entire SEC, specifically the quarterbacks of the SEC, could we please figure out a way to protect the football? You mentioned Jalen Milroe, 2 interceptions, 1 in the first quarter, 1 in the fourth quarter, both of them at very pivotal times that led to points. that even though they weren't necessarily the moment where you can say, oh, that's where the game was lost, they weren't necessarily game killers, but they were at pivotal times and had an effect on the game. Connor Wegman at A&M had 2 interceptions, both of them in the second half. Again, neither one of them were the game killers, but they sure didn't help. Both of them killed drives that had potential. So he had those 2. And then also, and those were incidentally, the first 2 interceptions of his career, by the way. But then A.J. Swan at Vanderbilt. I mean, he comes out of the gate and basically Wake Forest kicks the ball to Vanderbilt, and A.J. Swan says, oh, you guys look like you missed it. Here, did you want it back? I think it took him 2. It may have taken 1 throw, but at least 2 throws to turn around and give the ball straight back to Wake Forest. And did the same thing again in the second quarter. You have to – I know the guys we're talking about are young, but you've got to protect the ball. If you are in the offense or you're a running back or a quarterback, and even if you're young, you've got to protect the ball. I mean, that's priority number 1, because if you give the ball up, you can't get anything done. You're not going anywhere, and you're definitely not scoring points. Please, SEC quarterbacks especially, protect the football. There, I feel better.
What an emotional plea, Darren. I'm looking. Do I need to leave my pew and go forward? And I feel like I need to repent of something right now. That was mesmerizing.
I can tell you, Jalen Milroe, Connor Wegman, and A.J. Swan need to repent. I can tell you that. But let's move on.
Well, I was about to cue the 20th verse of "Just as I Am,"
and there are 20. So
at least. Woo, goodness.
Oh, my.
Was that your second or third? I'm just
that was my second.
Well, let's just stick with you because you're on a roll right now, Darren. What was your third?
All right. My third one is, again, talking about the entire SEC and how we are living in the upside down. Last week, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, we referenced Stranger Things and one of the music that was playing under This Week in Sports History or whatever. And I think we're living in Stranger Things upside down world right now. If you look at the top 3 passers in the SEC statistically right now and the top 3 rushers in the SEC statistically, here are the teams. Doesn't even matter about the players. Here are the teams. The top 3 passers are Vanderbilt, South Carolina, and LSU. The top 3 rushers are Mississippi State, Tennessee, and Missouri. Now, historically, and or even just this year's expectations, when you think about passers, were you at any point thinking, oh, well, that'll obviously be Vanderbilt is one of the leading passers. That'll obviously be. Now, South Carolina is not overly surprising because of the way the season ended, but still, when you think about who's going to be at the top of the SEC, you think about Tennessee, you think about Ole Miss, you think about historically Florida, even if that's not necessarily the expectation this year, you think about Mississippi State and everything they've done. But none of those guys are there. Typically, they're actually close to the bottom of the conference right now, or at least in that middle. The guys that have been in 1 or 2, had a couple of throws are at the bottom. Then when you look at rushing teams, you think about Alabama. You think about, again, Ole Miss. You definitely don't think about Mississippi State, Tennessee, or Missouri, or at least I don't. So to me, that very much feels like we're living at least 3 weeks in, or week 0 and 2 weeks in, we're living in the upside down. And I don't know, I don't even know what that means. It just makes me feel a little afraid, I guess, of what the season's going to look like if we keep going this route.
The only upside down I'm comfortable with is upside down cake. So
I'm all in on that. Absolutely.
Great analogy there, Darren. Well played. I noticed before we started recording, you're drinking a Diet Dr. Pepper. That must have something to do with this, because you've gone to preaching repentance to now bringing in cultural references. We're in the upside down, Darren. We're in the upside down right now in this podcast.
That's exactly right. I wish we had like stars playing in the background or something. What's your third takeaway?
Well, there's nothing upside down about this. Texas has found its quarterback. Quinn Ewers, 24 out of 38, 349 yards, 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. He played poised. Bryant-Denny Stadium was rocking. It was loud in there. And I was so impressed with Ewers. He didn't get flustered. At least he didn't show that he got flustered. He made good reads, good passes, used his legs when he needed to. He was a leader for that team in those crucial moments when Alabama was came back, got the lead, when they were threatening, when the crowd just was amped up. And I was so impressed with his steady calm and his performance. I think Texas has found their quarterback for as long as Quinn Ewers stays at Texas.
That's a great take, Ben. I agree completely with that. And, we've talked leading up to the game that we wondered what last year's game would have looked like if he would have stayed healthy. And to your point, he stayed healthy this year, and we've got our answer not only for this game, but for the foreseeable future, because you're spot on with that. It's a great take.
Well, before we move on to look at our sports pick'em standings and make our picks for this week on this very important day in American history, we pause for a very special This Week in Sports History.
October 30th, 2001, just 49 days after the tragic 9/11 attacks, President George W. Bush took the mound at Yankee Stadium. This was not just any baseball game. It was Game 3 of the World Series. The nation was still reeling from the attacks, and New Yorkers were in shock. President Bush had been encouraged to throw the first pitch at Game 1 of the World Series in Arizona for security purposes, but he declined, instead waiting for Game 3 in the Bronx. Dressed in an FDNY sweater covering a bulletproof vest, a somber Bush walked out from the Yankees dugout and waved to the crowd as he took the mound. The electric crowd cheered as the president threw a strike right over home plate. This moment is still considered one of the brightest moments in one of the nation's darkest times. It was more than just a ceremonial pitch, it was a symbol of resilience and unity. It showed that despite the tragedy, America could come together and stand strong. This iconic pitch by President Bush remains one of the most unifying moments in sports history.
Oh, thank you.
Well, let's look at an update on our sports pick'em contest going on. Darren, what are the standings? How did everybody do this past week? Can you go ahead and share with all of us the progress and who is in first place? Oh, looky there. I'm not surprised.
Look, who is in first? Wow. Well, my goodness. I don't. I'll take it. But we basically have a three-way tie. Actually, I can't say I'm in first place. We have a three-way tie for first place with myself, Paul, and Zach. And then you are there standing all by yourself, at least halfway up the mountain, maybe not atop the mountain, but at least halfway up the mountain in second place. You have sole claim to second place. So that's our top four positions this week. Myself, Paul, Zach, and then you, Sir Ben.
I'm keeping pace with the pack, the front runners, before make my move on that last turn. So enjoy your time right now.
Coming out of turn 4, here comes Ben.
Well, let's make some picks for this week, Darren, and see if I can topple you off of your throne, much the way that Wake Forest humbled Vanderbilt this past week.
That is hurtful and accurate. I can't even be upset about it, honestly.
Can't believe you're picking at me like that. Come on.
Well, just our records. I'm just reporting the facts. Just reporting the facts. That's all.
I think everyone's had enough time to see these records, so we can move on from that. So let's go to our first game. LSU travels to Starkville to play Mississippi State. Mississippi State team that came up big against Arizona in an overtime game. So what do you think of this game, Darren? When you look at both of these teams?
If I'm LSU, the thing that concerns me is the fact that Mississippi State has shown a running game. I know it's not been against top tier talent, but they've still showed a running game. And if you look at Will Rogers' stats, I mean, I think he only had like 18 or 20 passing attempts this most recent game. So comparative to what we're used to seeing with Will Rogers, that seems a little off. So it makes you kind of wonder, are they holding him back? Are there some things they're not showing until they get to this game, unless they had to? So if I'm LSU, that concerns me a little bit. I'm just not going to put a whole lot of stock in the LSU Grambling thing. Yes, they scored 73 points, but it was also Grambling. I think putting stock in those games is part of what got us to what this week looked like with some of the losses that came up. That being said, I do believe there's some credibility in the fact that Jaden Daniels was able to get his feet back under him, gain some confidence, and come out looking like what we expected him to at the start of the season against Mississippi State. And because of that, I think this is an LSU win. What about you, Ben?
I agree with you. We learned nothing about LSU against Grambling State.
Right.
This is the game where we see, has LSU learned anything from the walloping they took from Florida State? Mississippi State will be a tough opponent. They'll be ready for LSU. LSU on the roster, of course, has more talent from top to bottom, but that doesn't always translate into a victory. With
Very
that
true.
said, though, I'm going to go with the Tigers. If they play up to their capability, they should come out of this game with a win. But if they go in and they take Mississippi State for granted, they will leave Starkville with a loss. And I am absolutely terrified, Darren. I believe this is an 11 a.m. start.
Yeah.
Which is always a major ordeal for LSU for some reason.
Yep. Absolutely. And I think the other thing we have to really just very quickly, I don't care who you are, it is difficult to head to Starkville to play for whatever reason. That always presents even more of a challenge. And it's not necessarily because it's like a Death Valley type experience. You know, if you go to LSU, for whatever reason, it really presents a challenge to the visiting team when they come in.
More cowbell.
There you go. Oh, I might have to mute the game and watch it. I'm not going to lie.
The next game up is Kansas State traveling to Missouri. A matchup of Big 12 and SEC schools, or used to be two Big 12 schools. So when you look at this game, Darren, Kansas State's rolling right now. Missouri, I think they're 2-0 as well, but not quite the notoriety that Kansas State is receiving right now. What do you think about this game?
I think Missouri State's worst case scenario is to have a defense come into town, no matter who they've played against, that presents itself as stingy, and that's exactly what Kansas State defense does. I don't think that bodes well for the Missouri offense. Well, you listen to Miami fans talk, and they are not. Coach Drink and his "May the Force be with you" is not cute to them anymore. They may be 2-0, but it's not the 2-0 they expected. And I'm very afraid that this game is going to start an ugly, ugly time for Eli Drinkwitz in Missouri. I think Kansas State wins this game.
I'm going to go with Missouri in this game because I want to be able to say the name Drinkwitz several times next week in our podcast in a favorable light.
I like it.
And of course, to throw in a Star Wars reference, how can you resist that?
It's a beautiful thing.
You can't resist the Force.
No. Well done.
South Carolina and Shane Beamer is traveling down to Athens to face the number 1 ranked Georgia Bulldogs, who are also undefeated, but not tested up to this point yet. Is this going to be a test for Georgia, or is this going to be another Georgia route? What do you think, Darren?
I think unless South Carolina finds some kind of way to return 3 kickoffs, maybe 4 punts, and block every punt or field goal Georgia attempts, that there's just not a scenario that South Carolina wins this game. Yes, Georgia has not looked impressive. You do not look at what they've done so far and think, oh, well, that's no-brainer, a 12-0 team. That being said, I don't know that South Carolina can score against them. So Georgia's got the horses on offense that even if their scheme is not going the way you would think it would, they can still outscore this team. So this is a Georgia win.
Yeah, Georgia. Tennessee traveling to Florida in a very used to be a huge rivalry.
Absolutely.
I guess we could still say it is, although teams are trending in different directions. Tennessee, despite some questions, it seems to be rolling again. Florida seems to be struggling in the process that Billy Napier is taking the team through to rebuilding them to a championship level team. This could be a trap game for Tennessee.
Yep.
But Darren, I'm going to go with the Volunteers. I think they're going to go down. I think Joe Milton is going to correct some issues he had in the previous game. I think Tennessee. I think Josh Heupel is going to come up with a game plan that's going to get them out of that game with a victory. What about you?
I'm a fan of Josh Heupel. That being said,
But
yes, exactly. Big but. I've had concerns all offseason about Joe Milton. We've talked about it several times, and he showed that tendency to get nervous and overthrow, to turn everything into a rocket and everything into an overthrown rocket, especially during the first quarter. And this past week, and that was against Austin Peay. So when Joe Milton heads into Gainesville, because is it statistically the rivalry it used to be? No. This Saturday, when the game starts, will it seem like that big of a rivalry in Gainesville? I think so. So I think it's going to be a very intimidating atmosphere, and I think it gets the best of Joe Milton. I think he starts off looking that same way that he did against Austin Peay. It could be even worse for a longer amount of time, depending on what Florida is able to do with it. And it's there in Gainesville. That's been tough for Tennessee for 2 decades. I think Florida pulls off the upset. I'm calling Florida in this one.
You started this analysis with a but, and got me thinking, but is a big conjunction. It changes the whole course of a statement. You were
exactly
leading us. I like Josh Heupel, but
what did you say? I like indefinite articles.
Yeah.
I like big conjunctions.
You like you watched Schoolhouse Rock, didn't you? Conjunction.
That's exactly
junction.
right.
What's your function? Have you had some painful butts in your life, Darren? Were you in grade school when the girl said, "I like you, Darren, but," or the teacher said, "Darren, you're showing a lot of potential, but."
Hey, Darren, everybody in the class got a good grade, but you didn't. That may have happened a couple of times.
We might need to do an episode on the parts of speech in the English language. This is way too entertaining.
I think we're pretty close to having one put together.
Yeah. But we need to get back to the picks.
Exactly.
We've got Vanderbilt against a powerhouse UNLV led by Jerry Tarkanian. They're going to.
Well, the Running Rebels.
The Running Rebels do not exist any longer, Jerry Tarkanian. And that was basketball anyway. I don't know if UNLV has ever done anything in football, but the Commodores are traveling to Vegas. Maybe they'll have some good recreational time. I can't see this being much of a game. I've got Vanderbilt winning this.
It scares me, especially when you look at the Vegas odds and Vanderbilt on the road against a team like UNLV is only a 2-point favorite. That tells me that Vegas doesn't trust AJ Swan. It scares me, but I think Vanderbilt, I'm hoping this is the road test that kind of corrects some things and gets things a little bit on path. And I'm going to believe that. So I'm going Vanderbilt in this one as well.
Nice. And not a single but.
That's right. No buts in that one.
Georgia Tech, Rambling Rick, travels to Oxford to face the Ole Miss Rebels. Darren, who you got?
I have to go Ole Miss. I can't. I just don't see anything but Ole Miss in this one. I think it's going to be pretty convincing. Not just Ole Miss, but Ole Miss. I think that's the way this one's going to go. How about you, Ben?
I've got Ole Miss, and I think as the season goes on, we are going to appreciate more and more Lane Kiffin's hiring of Pete Golding on the defensive side of the ball. I think
Agree.
this team is going to continue to get better and better and better.
Yep, agree completely.
BYU is traveling to Fayetteville to face the Hogs
Yep.
of Arkansas, led by KJ Jefferson. Darren, I look at this game and I think we're all going to be calling the Hogs. I've got Arkansas winning this.
I agree completely. I think it has a little bit of a different look if they're by chance, going to Utah, but in Fayetteville, this is an Arkansas win.
Yeah, agreed. So thank you for watching another episode. We want to remind you that you can still participate in the CBS Sports Pickem that we do every week. Go to CBS Sports College Football Pickem. There's the password, Pickem 1234 exclamation point. No conjunctions are in the password at all. No if, ands, or buts, just letters and numbers.
But next week, the password may be if, and, but, 1, 2, 3, 4. Who knows?
And we may just sign off on this episode singing that song from Schoolhouse Rock, which first taught us what a conjunction is in the first place.
That's exactly right.
Thank you for joining us for another episode, but there's still more. Wait, there's more. There's more down territory.
You're in 4 down territory.
All right, let's make some picks in our annual 4 down territory. We're going to start with our sure thing pick. Guaranteed, your money back guarantee.
Guaranteed.
That this team is going to win. Darren, who is your sure thing for week 3?
I think Kansas State is going to show just how stingy their defense is. That's my sure thing pick. How about you, Ben?
I've got Arkansas over BYU. They're going to call the Hogs in Fayetteville. I think KJ Jefferson has a big game.
I like it for our old buddy Sam Pittman.
Let's talk upset pick of the week. Darren, who is yours?
If you call Florida over Tennessee, you got to just how's anything else other than that going to be the upset pick? So that's me, Florida over Tennessee. How about you?
From somebody from the great state of Tennessee, Darren, you sure know how to alienate a lot of people there.
But think about this. If I'm wrong, man, are they going to enjoy telling me about it? So that's the upside.
I've got Eli Drinkwitz learning the ways of the force and somehow leading Missouri to an upset over the Kansas State Wildcats.
Nice. So we've got sure thing versus upset. That'll be interesting.
The rebellion will take down the empire.
Well done, by the way. That's another great reference right there.
How about your brown bag pick? Who is wearing a brown bag this week based upon week 2, Darren?
The entire conference. Get it together. There are games that SEC teams played against non-conference teams that should have never been close, that were close, and there were games that should not have been losses that ended up being losses. The entire SEC needs to get it together. Until the end, it's a brown bag for the entire conference, every single team. How about you? What's yours?
It's like we're living in the upside down.
Exactly. People in the upside down have to wear brown bags in this upside down. So
my brown bag is the Texas A&M secondary. The defense played well against the run, holding Miami to less than 100 yards rushing. But the quarterback for Miami, Tyler Van Dyke, went off 374 yards, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions. He passed all over that secondary. DJ Durkin has a lot of work to do to get that defense ready to be able to handle passing attacks like that. So there you go. Texas A&M secondary. You are wearing the brown bag this week.
Great brown bag pick.
How about the post-game quote of the week? We always have a lot to choose from because if the SEC is nothing else, it is entertaining.
And, typically we have something funny. We talked about that a little bit last week. We talked about what Lane Kiffin had to say last week at the end of his game. But, sometimes a coach just kind of puts it on the line and lays it out there. And even if it's not something funny that makes you kind of laugh, it's still very entertaining just because of how straightforward it is. And if you're looking for straightforward, who's the pick going to 9 times out of 10 be, Ben? Who do you think that is?
Coach Saban.
Well done. That's exactly right. So let's listen to what Coach Saban had to say in this week's post-game quote of the week.
So if we can learn from some of the mistakes that we made, coaches and players alike, we can all get better and have a lot better opportunity, I think, to be successful in the future. So, but everybody's got basically 2 choices. You know, you can throw in the towel and quit and be mediocre, or you can fight and grind and do the hard things that you need to do to be successful. And I think you don't want to waste a failing, and we certainly don't want to waste this failing. So we're all going to be committed to trying to do things better, practice better, prepare better, have a better plan, you know, for the players, whatever it is, all of us, coaches and players alike.
Wow, it's pretty straightforward, like we said.
I heard that word, but everybody's got 2 choices.
That's right. That's exactly right. Do you think he called out the coaches and not just the players? Because that's a little bit what it felt like to me. I don't think that was just a message to the players.
I love his phrasing, never waste a failure or failing. Never waste that. And so I have no doubt that it's going to be a rough week of practice at Alabama as they get ready for this upcoming weekend.
Absolutely.
So I think this is the end of the show, Darren, unless you've got another butt somewhere.
I do not. I think it's time to butt out of the butt business. How's that?
So remember to join us on Pickem, make your picks. Subscribe to us if you like what you hear, what you see. If you want to be a part of the ongoing show and receive updates, be sure to subscribe to us. Like and comment. If you like what you heard, if you have a comment, if you're like, well, Ben and Darren, they blew it again, they missed this, or that fact was wrong, let us know. We'll be happy to correct that, because
absolutely,
we're from Louisiana. We don't take ourselves that seriously.
Exactly.
New episodes drop every Tuesday at 6 a.m. So remember to watch, listen at your convenience on whatever podcast platform you like to. And before we sign off, Darren, I want to say a very special happy birthday to our longtime listener, Nicole, one of our West Virginia fans. Happy birthday, Nicole. So we'll see y'all next Tuesday. Until then, take care.
Have a great week.
Thank you for making the Brew and Shaver Sports Podcast your go-to sports show. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review our show if you haven't already. Your feedback is so important. Let us know what you think about this week's show. Send an email to brewandshavers@gmail.com or a text to our text line 318-390-3599. We look forward to hearing from you. Thank you again for listening to the Brew and Shaver Sports Podcast. See you next week.